Railroad hobos. That name probably gives you a certain image, doesn't it? A scraggly-haired man, stick-and bundle in hand, hopping freight train to freight train to ride for free to the next town. And you'd be right, that's pretty much what they were in the 30s and early 1900s. But drifters have existed for as long as people have. What makes a hobo special? What exactly defines a hobo? And what happened to them all? Let's talk about it. So what exactly is a hobo? If we go by direct definition, they're a migrating worker, specifically a working individual, as this separates them from tramps and bums, who are not working individuals. As I mentioned before, drifters have and will always exist, but the number of hobos specifically increased greatly in the 30s, which largely was caused by a combination of no work and very low prospects at the homes of most people. What exactly do you do when there's no money and nowhere to earn it? Well, you hitch a free ride on a freight train and head to the next town over, rinse and repeat to your heart's desire. And how could you pick apart a hobo from, say, the usual bum? Well, that comes down to the iconic carrying stick, or sometimes a backpack that carries what little the person needed. Usually some sort of grime, since trains aren't the cleanest place, and whatever clothes get them through the elements. They weren't dressed to impress, more they were only looking for work, and continued moving as the work did. You know, as easygoing as all of that may sound, life as a hobo was the farthest thing from simple. Aside from being usually dirt poor, far from support and home, you're riding on a freight train which has little to no care for passengers that aren't supposed to be there. Many people suffered serious injuries or died trying to climb on or off these trains themselves, even just moving between cars. Or maybe were just beaten by the locomotive crew who didn't welcome the added passenger. Not to mention bulls, which are railroad police and have a particular history of violence with trespassers. You could fall under the train, be sucked under the train, crushed during a loading, shot, freeze to death in the cold. Hell, any hobo that was accidentally loaded into an ice factory probably just died there. You're dealing with the train itself, usually bunkering down in a grain car or boxcar that has no seats or real accommodation, not like it's supposed to. Again, these are freight trains. As well as dealing with the people who own, drive, and protect that train. The risks were apparent and ample, but this way of living couldn't be a constant forever. So, around the end of the Second World War, the world itself and railroads by extension were changing. Steam engines were on the out, being replaced by diesel traction. And while the trains were changing, the wagons they pulled changed, society itself started to shift as well, into what we call the post-war prosperity. With new work, aspirations, and opportunities, people didn't have to live the risky life of a hobo, and most stopped. This wasn't the end of the culture, however. Around the 70s and 80s, returning veterans from the Vietnam War were disillusioned and unsettled with society. In many cases, they were shunned, leading them to want to stay on the move. And how did they do this? Well, many resorted to the old hobo way of living. But even this would start to dwindle due to increasing workflows and changes to the railroads themselves in terms of safety and dealing with trespassers on those trains. So we know what happened to them, but that doesn't tell us much about the people. What were hobos like? What was their culture? As shunned by society as they were, the hobo was often a very peaceful and principled person. Just a few of these principles are, when in town, always respect the local law and officials, and try to be a gentleman at all times. Don't take advantage of someone who's in a vulnerable situation, locals or other hobos. Decide your own life. Don't let another person run or rule you. You know, all that tacky crap you'd see in the description of an Instagram selfie. But to these people, that isn't just tacky crap. These and others were ideologies that the hobos followed very closely and believed in greatly. They even had their own terms or dialects for certain situations, like bone polishers, meaning mean dogs, bulls, which are railroad police and still called that to this day, or California blankets, which are newspapers. Graffiti and markings were also used by hobos to give information to other hobos about the town they were in. One of the more iconic being a triangle with hands, signifying that a homeowner has a gun. or a horizontal zigzag, signifying a barking dog. And while even now, this is something that society tends to look down on, though the numbers are little to nothing compared to what they once were, you may be surprised to find out that the hobo life is very much still alive and well. There's even yearly hobo conventions, such as the National Hobo Convention in Britt, Iowa, on the second week of August. And while the numbers may not be as great, while society may not need the hobo like it once did, hundreds, if not thousands, of people still live their lives hopping freight train to freight train, destination to destination, keeping that flame of do not let anyone tell you how to live your life alive. And if you're curious about what the life of a modern-day hobo is like, I highly recommend one of my favorite YouTubers, Hobo Shoestring. This gentleman is the perfect representation of what a modern-day hobo is, hopping freight trains and keeping us smiling while he does it. Link to his channel in the description.
Oregon, and the other line is the one I need. Go down to Ogden, Salt Lake, points west. And this train here is a Portland train, so I don't want it taking me up to Pocatello instead of Ogden. So I gotta get off, catch another train. Every now and then you hear that wind blowing against some boxcar doors.
And with all of that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed learning what happened to the railway hobos. Or railroad, my bad, don't hang me. It's not that they ever left. Hell, it's likely they never will. Nowadays, they just move a little differently. And given how trains do seems to change every year, it's hard to blame them for doing so.
You had to really be on the bum asking at back doors for handouts. And a handout was something they'd give to you in a sack to take, you know. They called it a lump also. And a knee shaker was when you'd sit down on the back porch and they'd bring you a tray of sandwiches or something to eat. And a sit down was when they'd ask you to come in and you could eat with the family.
Panhandling is hard to do, especially coming from the kind of environment that I did. But you learn it in a bloody hurry when you're hungry and haven't eaten for 24 or 36 hours. Getting food from a restaurant is kind of a technique you learn. You go walk back and forth in front of the restaurant or cafe and look for a man on a stool, usually at a counter. And you buzz right in there and speak right up to the waitress and give them the story. You know, have you got any work to do in exchange for something to eat? And sometimes they would respond. An owner usually wouldn't. He'd just say, get the hell out of here. But the kicker there is that that if you do get turned down, one or the other of these people that's beside you, there's a chance they will pipe up and say, it's okay, lady, give the man his breakfast, or give him a cup of coffee and I'll pay for it. And then you're home free for the time, you know.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.